Have you ever looked back at an unforgettable and embarrassing conversation you've once had with someone? Or, wait, maybe you've had more than just one such incident. This could actually mean conversations may not exactly be your strongest suit. But guess what? We're about to change that today. Stick with us as we go through some of the secrets you should know to get better at talking to people. Hit that like and subscribe button, and let's roll. Starting with number 1, try to get out of your comfort zone. Change takes practice. It does not happen overnight, and unless and until you challenge yourself, change just isn't happening. You might end up having a couple of bloopers sometimes, but that only means that you've taken the first step to change. Now, getting out of your comfort zone doesn't mean you try and play it safe. You really have to put yourself out there. There are a bunch of safe plays that people would rather choose than to be bold enough to have a conversation. But what they don't know is that these methods do nothing but decelerate your communicative progress. What safety methods are we talking about? Behaviors such as jumping ship during conversations, small talk, dry short responses, or even rehearsing or giving scripted replies that can completely damage the growth of a conversation. People also make the mistake of distracting themselves during a conversation, like paying attention to gadgets and whatnot. You can even ruin a conversation by not being open enough. While formality is best used in many situations, when you're trying to engage in a casual conversation, formality can completely ruin the mood. Another thing that could absolutely destroy a conversation is monologuing. Nobody wants to hear you ramble on and on just so the silence isn't unnoticeable. All these methods or safe moods are doing a lot more in your favor than you think. What we're trying to do here is to make sure that we won't have to overly depend on those things. And one of those things that helps us with that is number 2, live in reality more than in the mind. A lot of times, nearly most everything we worry about does not come true. It's all in the head. This is true especially in the case of people suffering from anxiety. Your mind lets you overthink and overanalyze a situation, and while you try to maintain a conversation, the hundreds of questions running through your mind just won't allow it. Truth is, we have to stop caring too much about our impressions and what people think about us. The less we get anxious about these things, the more we can converse. But how does an anxious mind deal with such thoughts? Be optimistic. An anxious mind is wired in such a way that it keeps throwing insecurities at you, and that in turn makes you believe those thoughts, when in reality, it's all in your head. So when you start to feel insecure, try to think of things more positively, to completely nullify those thoughts. Mindfulness can be a wonderful way to get out of your head and start being more aware of your surroundings. Adjust your focus once again. The minute a negative thought arises, you'll feel like giving into it as it's the easiest thing for the mind to do. But take a step and ignore those thoughts. Take your control back by shrugging your shoulders around those thoughts and focus mainly on the person you're trying to talk to. The next thing to do is to start with a comfortable topic. There are about a million things one can choose to talk about for the sake of starting a conversation, which is exactly what makes it so difficult to pick what to talk about. But here's the thing, make your choices easier by picking something you're comfortable with talking about. Of course, the dynamic is different when it's someone you're close enough to be yourself unapologetically, but until that happens, it's always wise to avoid the more controversial topics and choose topics that wouldn't make someone uncomfortable. Now, number 4, here's your cue. Once you set your mind on a topic, this is your cue to construct a conversation. Don't make it sound forced. Instead, allow it to take place very naturally. It wouldn't hurt to use a little small talk to initiate the conversation that's about to happen. Number 5, repeat a topic. There are times when you feel like you could talk more about something that you already have. Though it may seem as though this topic has almost concluded, if it still has more potential to be talked about, don't hesitate to circle back to it. This of course doesn't apply if the conversation has happened to a point of exhaustion. The next thing we have to do is pay attention to a person's responses during the conversation. Social cues can be very important in judging if a conversation is being enjoyed or not. They can be certain gestures the other person involved in conversation makes, or even the way they respond verbally. A lot of negative social cues can mean that a person may not be enjoying a conversation as much as we want them to. Or maybe your conversation may be going very well, but the person just doesn't seem interested enough to want to talk. Analyze these cues to signal when to go on and when to stop. When you notice that you might have to stop, don't make an abrupt and offensive statement about how they don't seem interested enough. Instead, tell them that you'll catch them at a better time when they're free. Not only does that avoid any discord among the two people, but it also leaves space for the unfinished conversation to be continued. Number 8, don't always go solo. One-on-one conversations might be a lot less difficult to handle because you're dealing with a more manageable audience. But do you want to stereotype yourself as only being good at private conversations? Or do you want to try letting your voice be heard among larger crowds? If the latter is your choice, then you gotta hear this out. When the audience is larger, it's harder on so many more levels to get your point across. It's almost impossible to even make a statement most of the time without being interrupted by other voices. It takes an outgoing person to be able to voice their opinions in a crowd. But how do we tackle this? Begin by meeting eyes with the main speaker of the group, so you alerted them that you have something to say. Or just raise your hand to do the same. And if they appear disappointed in being interrupted, just apologize and go on to speak. And last of all, increase your voice and make sure it's audible enough to be heard, but be careful not to yell. At number 9, we have be assertive and ask more. When you're on a date with someone you like, it's natural to feel extra pressure to keep the conversation flowing. The goal of a first date isn't to find your soulmate or to win someone over. It's about getting to know each other, discovering common interests, and determining if there's a mutual interest in a second date. Keeping this in mind helps you stay relaxed and level-headed. Ask questions that encourage your date to talk and relieve some of the controversial pressure from yourself. Inquire about their work, education, and hobbies, or use a list of questions designed for dates. This not only helps keep the conversation going, but also helps you learn more about your date. Opening up is crucial for building a real connection and serves as a compatibility test. Discuss your interests, hobbies, and goals to find common ground and gauge their responses. This mutual exchange can reveal if you're on the same wavelength. Analyze the situation when on call or on text. Navigating conversations without visual cues can be challenging, especially over the phone or through text. This is why it's always better to respond to calls and texts when you can give your full attention, not when your toddler is screaming or when you're rushing to a meeting. When calling someone, ask if it's a good time to talk, and if not, request a callback. If the conversation stalls or it is clearly a bad time, don't hesitate to end it. To avoid misunderstandings from slow replies, explain with, "I'm thinking," or "hold on a sec," or "I'm about to go into a meeting and I'll text you after." Use emojis and exclamation points to text to convey emotion and emphasis. For important or sensitive matters, opt for a phone or video call over texting or emailing. And once you follow through all these tips, you'll be sure to get better at conversations one day after the other. Remember, baby steps. And that's all for today's video. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure you smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click on the tiny bell icon on the side to stay notified and updated of all of our upcoming content. Do you like the daily motivation to explore your life? Come, join us where we reveal the 7 life hacks that will motivate you to do anything.